Alright, hello YouTube, Paul the Car Whisperer here, and today I just got a brand new AC compressor for my car, and we're going to attempt to pull out the old one and swap in the new one. So the AC compressor is right down here, below the alternator, so it's kind of buried in there. So step number one is start removing parts so that we can get at it. So there's just a few things that you need to remove in order to get access to the actual compressor. There's a fan that I'm removing here, and then you need to get the coolant reservoir out of the way a little bit. I've seen other people get access to the compressor by removing the power steering pump and the alternator, so that's an option, but this one worked for me. There's enough clearance, and I think it's the easiest way to go. Alright, so now the last thing to get the condenser fan out is there's one electrical connection right here. And then it looks like there's also one right down there. So the next thing we have to do is remove this belt. And we're going to do that by putting a 14mm socket right here, pulling it this way to release the tension, and then sliding the belt off. So I ended up having to go with this box wrench and pipe setup because I didn't have enough clearance with a breaker bar and a 14mm socket. So this worked for me, but they make serpentine belt removal tools, which work a lot better. So if you want to go that route, that's an option too. Alright, so we have a lot more space to work in here, which is good. To get the compressor out, there are a few things that we need to take off. So there are the two AC lines, which are right here. And then there are, it's hard to see them, but there's a bolt here. There is a bolt. There's a bolt here. So one mounting bolt, two mounting bolt, AC lines. And then there are also two mounting bolts on the bottom of the compressor. You can't really see them from here, but if we look under the passenger side wheel well, we can see them pretty well. So here's a pretty good shot. So one is right here and the other right there. So 1, 2. All right, so now we're underneath the car, and I'm going to start by removing those two mounting bolts on the bottom of the compressor. Alright, so now the next thing I'm going to do is remove the AC lines, and this is very important. Make sure that you have gotten your system evacuated before you do this, because if the lines are under pressure, then refrigerant is going to come spewing out, and it's going to be a little bit of an explosion, and it's going to get in your eyes, and it's going to be bad. So make sure your system is depressurized before you do this. The first thing you want to do after you disconnect the AC lines is put a towel in them and tie them off, just to make sure that no debris or contaminants get into the AC lines, because you don't want that. And now the last thing to do is to remove the two mounting bolts on the top of the compressor. Those are the last things holding this thing onto the car, and after that we'll be able to remove it. Okay, so now we've removed all four mounting bolts, we've removed the two AC lines, and we're ready to pull this out. So there is enough clearance, but it's very tight, and make sure that you do not damage the radiator fins on your way out, because they're very fragile, and if you're not careful, you'll smash that up and have to get a new radiator, and that's not what you want. Okay, so now we're ready to drop the new compressor in. You'll see in a second that I should have put the lower mounting bolts through the holes in the compressor first before doing this, because I ended up not having enough clearance. So just take note of that, but other than that, you can just drop the new compressor in. And you might have noticed this when taking the old compressor out, but there are these convenient mounting hooks that you can rest the compressor on before threading in the bolts. All right, so we're underneath the car looking at where we need to bolt in the compressor from the bottom. And this is very important. I've realized that you need to put the bolts in first before you drop the compressor into that hook, or else you're not going to have enough clearance to get the bolts in. So I had to drop the compressor off of those hooks and then slide one of the bolts in and then put it back on the hook so that I didn't have to run into that clearance issue again. But that's all straightened out, so now I'm just bolting everything back together. Alright, and the new compressor came with these little covers on them, just to protect it from stuff getting inside the compressor, and I waited until I had it installed to take them off so I didn't get a bunch of dirt in it when I was installing it. But now that it's all set, I can take those out, and then make sure you hang on to the nuts holding these covers in, because you'll use those to connect the AC lines afterwards. So right now I'm going to replace the O-rings on both of the AC lines with new ones, And then a good tip there is to coat the O-rings with a little bit of refrigerant just to moisten them up. It'll create a better seal. Alright, so now the new compressor is installed and we're good to go. All that's left is reinstalling the condenser fan and serpentine belt, just in the reverse order of how you removed everything. I have the belt back on here. And then after this point, the only thing left to do to get your car cold again is to recharge up the system. So right now there's no refrigerant in the system. It's depressurized. It's not going to cool your car down, but I'm going to try to make a video on how to charge your system and do that properly. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching this video, and remember to like it and subscribe to Paul the Car Whisperer.